Welcome to Grief is the New Normal. I'm Dr. Heather Taylor, a licensed psychologist and grief specialist, here to help change the conversation about grief and build community and connection while we all adjust to this new normal we are living in. This podcast is for you if you are grieving or if you are supporting someone in a season of grief. Hey friends, welcome back to Grief is the New Normal. I'm Dr. Heather Taylor, and today we're talking about a grief bomb that hits a lot of people hard: moving. And no, I'm not talking about the logistics of packing boxes or renting a U-Haul. I'm talking about the grief that comes when leaving behind a home, a city, a community, or a version of life that held a lot of meaning. Because here's the deal: moving is not just a physical transition, it's an emotional one. So today we're diving into why moving brings up so much unexpected grief, how to honor what you're leaving behind, even if the move is your decision, what to do with the emotional clutter that shows up while packing, and how to create closure and comfort when your whole world is shifting. Let's get into it. So, why moving triggers grief, even if it's a good move? Here's the truth: you can be excited about your new place and still mourn what you're leaving behind. This is one of those both and situations that we talk about all the time on this podcast, because even if the move is a promotion, a fresh start, or something you chose, you're still saying goodbye to a chapter of your life, and that deserves to be acknowledged. Moving often means letting go of routines that made you feel grounded, losing proximity to people who've held space for you, closing the door on a version of yourself that lived in that space. Sometimes it might even mean leaving behind the last place your person was alive, packing up a home filled with memories, or starting over without the safety net that you once had. And all of that adds up to real grief. So, story time with Heather. I've moved a number of times in my life, and I'm a nester. I really love to make a space my own. I can be pretty extroverted, but I recharge at home, and having a safe space to do that is really important for me. And there's been a few times in my life where the move has been really challenging or emotional. And so I'm going to share a bit about those today. I think for me, my very first big move, I grew up in a single wide trailer and on our property in the woods. And I loved that little trailer. It was great. And we built a house on our property, and that was a really big deal. And I felt excited about that move. I didn't mourn that. There wasn't grief there. And even going off to college for the first time, I missed the people, but I wasn't grieving my bedroom. I knew I would still go home to my childhood home. My folks even still live in the same house that I grew up in. So I can go back to that room. It's looked different over time, but there wasn't a lot of grief around the room when I went away to college. I was more excited about independence and finding myself and all of those things in the early 2000s when I moved out. And then I've never moved back home. I stayed out on my own, and my folks have helped with moves, and that's been amazing. And I guess for me, moving has always been more of an adventure. So there have only been a couple times where there was real grief about where I was moving. I guess the one that's coming to mind where there was the most grief was moving out of my apartment when I was in my doctoral program. So I had bounced around. We have a lot of family. So I lived with one of my aunts and uncles off and on a couple times, and lived with a cousin, but I had never had my own apartment. I'd always had roommates. And so when I started my doctoral program, they had on-campus housing, and I applied and I got in, and it was this little basement style apartment. I called it my little dungeon, and I loved that apartment. I loved my little porch, and I loved that it was my own space, and I felt so safe there. I felt so comfortable. It was easy to get to campus. I could take buses. It was just such a wonderful little space that was mine. And I really felt like I needed that after Garrett died. And I made it my own. It had lots of personality. It did not have a dishwasher, which was the only flaw of that whole apartment. And I loved it. And so when it was time to move on. There was a lot of grief there. That had been a place where I found myself after Garrett died, where I had done a lot of healing and growth. And I was so sad about leaving that. So sad. So sad. And I loved this city. And there was just a lot of sadness in moving on from that space. And then it was just a lot of hopping from apartments to apartment. And I never felt quite settled. I always tried to make it feel like home, but there was just a lot of transition that just kept happening and hard things. And I don't have to get into all of that. And so there was a lot of grief around that season of independence in my life and what that little home had been for me and the safe space that it was and the community and connection there. It was complicated. There was a lot of grief that happened after, and I just felt sad knowing that I wasn't going to get to go back to that time in that season. Yeah, so that's my moving story. And there's been other moving stories, but I feel like that's the one that had the biggest amount of grief that I feel comfortable getting into today. Let's pivot a bit and talk about the part that, no one really warns you about, how packing can be emotional warfare. You're opening drawers filled with memories. You're touching objects that belong to people you've lost. You're coming face to face with how much life happened in this space. And that can bring up all kinds of feelings like sadness and guilt and anger and nostalgia and panic. You might even be wondering, why am I freaking out over a coffee mug? What is going on here? Or things that get broken. So all of those different feelings might lead you to wonder, why am I crying over a freaking coffee mug? Because it's not just a coffee mug. It's who you used to be when you used it. So if you find yourself crying on the floor, surrounded by half-packed boxes, that's normal. You're not crazy. You're grieving. If packing feels like an emotional minefield, you're not doing it wrong. You're honoring your life, these relationships, these memories, this season, and that takes time. That gets to be okay. So what do we do when moving stirs up all of these layers of emotion? We can't avoid it. We can't just stuff it down. And we can move through it with some more awareness and care. So here are a few ways to make space for grief in this transition. 1, create your own goodbye ritual. Walk through each room and say thank you. Thank it for the work that you did, the connections you had, the laughter you shared, the memories that you made. Say thank you. You can take a photo or light a candle, journal what this space meant to you. Was this where you deepened a friendship? Was this where you made a life-changing decision? Was this the room that held the last hug that you shared with your person? Journal what those spaces meant for you. And do something to mark the end, not just the logistics. Like, you can sage this space or play a certain song and let yourself feel whatever comes up. Doing something meaningful to make meaning in that space is helpful. Number 2, let yourself keep things that matter, even if they're impractical. You don't need to Marie Kondo your whole life. If something holds emotional value, emotional weight, that's reason enough to keep it. You don't have to purge it right away. Okay, so another story time with Heather. So for my 24th birthday, that was the last birthday I got to share with my brother. And for his present to me, he's like, go shopping, pick out an outfit, and I'll reimburse you for that outfit, and that'll be my present. Just get something that makes you feel good. And I remember I had this pair of maroon heels that I bought for this outfit. Maroon's one of my go-to colors. And I remember when I was moving out of the dungeon apartment, I had such a hard time trying to let go of things that I didn't wear as much anymore that were just sentimental value. And so what I did is I put the heels on and I took a picture of my feet in those heels because I hadn't worn them in a long time. It didn't make sense to move them into the next space because of size limitations on closets and storage and things. And so I took a picture in that item that held a lot of weight, and that was really helpful for me. Yeah. Number 3, talk about the loss, even if it feels silly. Tell your people, hey, I'm excited about this move and I am also falling apart. Please send reinforcements. Make space for your grief, even when others expect you to be pumped about the move. Again, it gets to be that both and, right? Number 4, give yourself a window of grace after you land. You don't have to have it all together the second you unpack. Grief may follow into the new place, and that's okay. It doesn't have to be a sprint to feel settled, to make sure that this feels exactly the same way that your previous home did. You can let your new space slowly become home. That gets to be okay. So some of you might be moving after loss. Some of you are leaving the house you shared with your person. Some of you are starting over, maybe not by choice, but because you had to. And that grief is layered because you're not just moving addresses, you're carrying that heartbreak in boxes. You're grieving the life you thought you'd continue living in that place. So if your move is tied to something traumatic or bittersweet or completely devastating, please know that I see you. You're not just relocating, you're surviving. And that is not a small thing. Often in grief, we talk about some of these choices were made and it wasn't us making those choices. It just happened. Like we didn't choose our person to die. We didn't choose this natural disaster to happen. We didn't choose the move. It was just forces out of our control. We can have complicated feelings about our lack of choice in these things, that it didn't work out, that we couldn't make it work to stay. And so it's okay to feel more than one way about these life situations. So as we wrap up today's episode, here's what I want you to take away. 1, moving is more than a to-do list. It's a goodbye. So honor yourself with saying goodbye in the ways that make sense for you. Have that final campfire in the backyard. Even if it's impractical and you're doing it in winter and there's snow, have that final campfire, roast those s'mores. Do the things that make sense for you to say goodbye to the space that has served you, that has been where you've landed. You are allowed to grieve what you're leaving behind, even if you're excited for what's next. It's that both and, right? Next, you don't have to rush the process of making a new space feel like home. That's going to take time. It took you time to settle in the home that you're in right now. It's going to take time to settle in the home that you're moving into, to personalize it, to make it make sense for you. And it's okay to change things. If you thought you were going to something and now you don't, like, it's okay to change your mind and pivot. And lastly, most importantly, you're allowed to take your memories and your grief with you. There is room for them in the new space. You can continue to grieve and mourn. I was talking with a client a couple weeks ago. They're flying back across the country to visit some childhood friends, and they make this trip every couple of years, and they shared about one of the times they drove by their childhood home and met the family that lives there now, and they got to walk through it. And that was so healing for them and helpful for them, that they got to look through those old rooms that had been so pivotal for their childhood. It's okay to take our memories and our grief with us as we move into new homes, and it's okay to go back and visit. So here's your gentle nudge for today's session. Before your next move, emotional or physical, ask yourself, what do I need to honor before I go? What's the legacy that I need to leave? What's the meaning I need to make here? So if this episode hit home for you, please send it to a friend who's maybe in the middle of a transition. And if you're in the middle of a move yourself, I'm rooting for you. You've got this. You're going to get through this. Remember to take care of yourselves, be kind to yourselves today, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. That's it for today's episode of Grief is the New Normal. If this conversation resonated with you, or you think it might benefit someone else, please share it. Sharing can open doors to healing, understanding, and normalizing these griefy conversations. If you're craving deeper insights or ongoing support, consider signing up for the Grief Gap newsletter. It's packed with resources, tips, and personal stories to help you navigate your grief journey. Visit the website www.griefisthenewnormal.com to subscribe. For those who prefer a more personal touch to their healing process, check out my grief journal, Authentically Unapologetic. It's designed to help you explore your grief on your own terms, with prompts and exercises that encourage reflection and growth. I'm Dr. Heather Taylor, and I look forward to our next meaningful conversation. Our soothing tunes are provided by the Datacorns. If you're interested in sharing your story, collaborating, or learning more, please email me at hello@griefisthenewnormal.com. You can also stream the episodes on YouTube for more engaging content. Until next time, keep exploring your grief with intention and support, remembering you don't have to do this alone.